beyond the thunder and lightning, past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Greetings. Thank you all for joining, and as always, welcome back. The Guardian reports an existential battle of interests, what the Sudanese war is actually about. A bitter race to claim economic and political power has divided the country, and the human cost can no longer be ignored. What's happening in Sudan? Who's really behind it and why? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each program, my guests and I connect the dots between current events and the broader historical context in which most events occur. Let's take a quick look at a couple of today's headlines. Mexican president's defiant 5 words to Trump after he threatens to bomb cartels. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has rebuffed the aid of the U.S. in defeating cartels on Mexican soil a day after Donald Trump announced he was willing to do whatever it takes to stop drugs from entering the country. Quote, here are the 5 words. It's not going to happen, end quote. Sheinbaum said, according to Politico, quote, Trump has suggested it on various occasions, or he has said, we offer you a United States military intervention in Mexico, whatever you need to fight the criminal groups, end quote. But she says, I've told him on every occasion, we can collaborate, that they can help us with information they have, but that we operate in our own territory. We do not accept any intervention by a foreign government. Then she added that according to her, and she also said this repeatedly, not only to Trump, but to Marco Rubio as well. Well, President Sheinbaum is quite clear, calling Trump's bluff. J.D. Vance and Hegseth, y'all need to tell Trump, it's one thing to murder people in fishing boats. It's another thing to invade a sovereign nation. Again, his bluff is being called. So what you gonna do now, Donald Trump? Israel launches major attacks across Gaza, killing at least 28 Palestinians, including many children. This is from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. The Israeli military launched strikes across Gaza yesterday, killing at least 28 Palestinians, including 17 women and children, as it continues to violate the U.S.-backed ceasefire deal. The U.S. military claimed that its forces, the Israeli military claimed that its forces came under fire in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, but provided no evidence. And according to Israeli media, there were no casualties among the IDF troops. And the attack occurred on the Israeli-occupied side of the Yellow Line. Hamas later denied that its fighters fired on Israeli troops and called the claim, quote, a weak and exposed attempt to justify their ongoing crimes and violations, end quote. Following the alleged incident, the IDF unleashed strikes on Gaza City. Here's a brief clip. This is from Lebanon. This is not from Gaza, but I think it all winds up looking the same.
An Israeli strike on a Palestinian refugee camp in southern Lebanon has killed more than a dozen people and injured several others, according to medical authorities. Lebanon's national news agency reported 3 missiles struck an area near a mosque inside the Ain al-Hilweh camp. Emergency responders transported the injured to nearby hospitals. The Israeli military said the strike had targeted a Hamas training compound. Local factions of the Palestine Liberation Organization in Sidon condemned the strike.
That was Lebanon yesterday, and of course, no evidence has been provided. The Palestinian news agency Wafa reported that one Israeli strike targeted the Ministry of Awqaf and Religious Affairs in southeastern Gaza City, killing at least 10. And they call this a peace plan. As Gil Scott-Heron told us about Henry Kissinger, he called him the international godfather of peace of Vietnam, a piece of Laos, a piece of Angola, a piece of Cuba. And they call this a peace plan. Finally, U.S. Coast Guard will no longer classify swastikas, nooses, as hate symbols. The military service, which falls under Homeland Security, has drafted a new policy that classifies them as potentially divisive. Instead, the Coast Guard will classify the Nazi-era insignia as potentially divisive under its new guidelines. The new policy, set to take effect the 15th of December, similarly downgrades the definition of nooses and the Confederate flag, though display of the latter remains banned, according to documents reviewed by the Washington Post. Oh, times they be a-changin'. The issue before us today: Trump announces U.S. making new effort to end war in Sudan, citing MBS requests. President Trump said yesterday that the U.S. would immediately start a new effort to end the conflict in Sudan, saying he was acting at the urging of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who met with him at the White House on Tuesday. Well, let's hope that Trump doesn't take a page from his Palestinian playbook and he tries to run the same plays in Sudan. My guest is a historian and primary first-hand researcher specializing in African and African-American history and culture. His most extensive set of articles is the 6-part essay on the vanishing evidence of classical African civilizations. He is Professor Manu Ampim. Welcome, my brother, to Connecting the Dots.
Thank you, Brother Wilmer. I'm glad to be with you.
So I know you had some thoughts on that Coast Guard swastika story. So before we get to talking about Sudan, your thoughts there, sir?
Well, you know, on the swastika, we know about the Nazi Party adopting that symbol in 1920 as a symbol of white supremacy and hate. And I'll give you a quick story. A couple years ago, I had a student, and her name is Swastika. So when she was on a campus, I'm at Contra Costa College in Northern California. She was on a campus-wide Zoom event, and the IT person thought this was a white supremacist troll and banned her from the meeting. And so I thought it was funny because when I actually checked, that is her official name. So I advised her, don't just have your first name, have your full name there so people can know that you're legitimate. But the name, and I met with her, the symbol and the word swastika, it comes from the East. So people who practice Buddhism or even Hinduism, the name swastika means good fortune or something very positive. So that symbol and the name itself was co-opted by white supremacists in the early 20th century. And this is the version that we know of. And as a matter of fact, this student Swastika, she had my class about a year and a half ago. She just emailed me today for an evaluation. And I thought about for a recommendation. It was for her academic career. And so that I was reminded of her name. And I had a chuckle because people were alarmed that somebody would be in a meeting with their camera off and only the name Swastika. I told her, have your full name and keep the camera on, and that it's your responsibility to teach the public about your name and the tradition. Don't shy away from it, but teach.
And two things. One, I know that you mentioned it comes from the East. I know it's all that symbol can also be found in some Native American texts and representations. And what, by the way, is her ethnicity?
She is, let's see, she is from Nepal, but her family lives in India.
Okay.
She spent a lot of time in India. So that's why I had a good discussion with her about the name, the meaning. And it's very common, by the way. It's a very common name for a lot of people in that region.
That's why we bring brothers like you on the show.
Yes, sir.
So we look at Sudan and South Sudan, and this question could be 15 shows long. There's a civil war going on. Who's fighting? Why? And whose interests are really being protected and defended here?
Well, yes, sir. As a political science, I appreciate the context and that you provide, because that's very important that we know background. Well, I'll just say that I've been spending a lot of time in Sudan since 2007. So a lot of what I know is from firsthand experience. And what's happening now, well, there was a 30-year dictator, President Omar el-Bashir, who ruled from 1989 to 2019. So the people rose up in December of 2018. Bashir, he called for a state of emergency. I was there in December of 18 and January 2019, and this was a people's revolution all across the country at every social level that you can think of in the society were involved. A lot of people that I knew were involved because it was so widespread. Professors, students, regular everyday people, and they were upset by the economy. People couldn't get fuel, they couldn't get bread, and they overthrew. I didn't think the people were that organized, but they were. So I left in January 2019 from Sudan, and by April, Bashir was overthrown. It was a people's revolution, and then the military got involved, and there was supposed to be a transitional government. The military is supposed to make sure that it would be civilian rule. They kept saying, we'll get to it, but they never got to civilian rule. And by April 2023, a civil war broke out between the Sudanese armed forces and the Jinjuit, who have been rebranded as the Rapid Support Forces. The Rapid Support Forces or the RSF. These are military operatives, these are militants, these are murderers. And the fact is that these are people that want to take over the entire land and literally, as they say, displace Black Africans. So the Sudanese people across the country, they don't support the Sudanese military, and they definitely don't support the Jinjuit. The Jinjuit is the better term than Rapid Support Forces, because Jinjuit in the local term description in Arabic means devil on horseback, and the Jinjuit are people that operate in the western part of Sudan, bordering on Chad, and the Jinjuit they describe and identify as Arab. Many of them are Arab, as we would see them in the U.S., but others are Africans. They're Black Africans who've lost their identity, and they identify with Arab because they speak Arabic, they practice Islam, and their whole goal now and what's happening in the war is the Sudanese military is attempting to ouster the Rapid Support Forces, or the Jinjuit, who are more dangerous and destructive than the military. The people don't support either group, but they do want the Sudanese military to be successful, because the military are not simply killing and massacring people as the Jinjuit are doing. So those are the two forces, the Jinjuit and the Sudanese military, that hijacked the People's Revolution that occurred in April 2019.
It's interesting that you, in talking about the Jinjuit, make the point that they see themselves not as African, but they see themselves as Arab. And that was at the crux of a lot of the conflict in Libya with Gaddafi. Gaddafi saw himself as African not Arab, and that caused an awful lot of tension and friction with the Arab states. And many will make the point that that was one of the data points that helped push Obama into moving against Gaddafi. Any correlation there?
Yes. When I first went to Sudan in 2007, I was surprised. I've traveled to a couple dozen countries around the world. I spent a lot of time in Egypt, in Nubia, but when I first went to Sudan, I was looking for the Arabs, and my colleague and I went through much of the country, and I'm looking for Arabs that look like Omar Sharif or Zahi Hawass, that Indiana Jones guy is always in the History Channel documentaries and National Geographic, and I did not find the ethnically and Arab type.
The phenotype.
The phenotype. I didn't find it, so I finally, and I had a light bulb moment when just before I was leaving after that, spending time in Sudan, because my colleague is always dismissing the Arabs, and I finally recognized that when the Sudanese are saying Arab, they mean the mindset, they mean the mentality, and not the physical appearance or phenotype. So when people say typically Arab, they mean the same thing that the cultural community of Black folks here in the U.S. mean when we say somebody's a Negro. They're dismissing them because of their mentality, and they're not commenting on their physical appearance or their ethnicity. So the Arab type, I finally recognized that's what they typically mean. And it wasn't until much later, spending a lot of time in Sudan doing field work on classical African civilizations of Kush and Nubia, that there are some Arabs there, but they're not as prominent and dominant as we may think from the Western media, because the Western media just lumps everybody into an Arab category when there's no possible way that they're Arab in any way. And also Omar Bashir identifies as Arab. And the reason why that's beneficial politically is because when the British were dominating the area in Egypt, and then they go further south to Sudan to dominate the area, they set up the capital city of Khartoum as a place where the colonial subjects can rule with British control and domination, and they set up Khartoum. So anybody that wanted to have a political future and be a part of a colonial government, they had to not only center themselves in Khartoum, but make up a fake history and a fake pedigree that doesn't exist. So Omar Bashir, the dictator that was overthrown, for example, he denies his mother's connection to the people of Dongola. This is in Nubia, in the northern part of Sudan. He doesn't talk about himself being from Dongola and his mother's family, a side of the family. He presents himself as an Arab, and this is the problem, is that folks don't see the whole picture. And the problem, in addition to this, is that the real Arabs and those that have an Arab mentality, they literally have a goal in Sudan through the Janjaweed to literally slaughter, massacre, and eliminate the so-called Black Africans, who they call Zerga. Zerga is a term they use to mean, it really means blue. So they mean blue black. The people are very dark color. So they call them blue black as a derogatory slur. So these people have no respect for the indigenous Black Africans. They're slaughtering them. The Janjaweed are. That's why the people call them devils on horseback. And also I have a Nubian colleague that describes this as the Islamists. These Islamists, they are involved with a concerted effort to rewrite the history of the region and claim and make up a wild historical myth that there were no Nubians around either, and that those monuments and the land belonged to them, the Arabs, and the Nubians were latecomers. And there's a battle on that basis as well, which goes back long before the war started in April of 2023.
So as you talk about the mindset of Arab, not the phenotype, elaborate a little more on how that manifests itself in Sudan, and what does that mean if that question what are some of the more practical applications and impacts of having that mindset? Is that strictly colonial? How does it manifest itself?
Okay, that's a good question. It manifests very directly. So right now, what's happening in Sudan, the Jinjuit are on a campaign, for example, in the western part of Sudan, in Darfur, in the area of Western Sudan, Darfur, that borders Chad. The Jinjuit have a stated campaign, and this is what they're acting on, to literally massacre and kill all of the Masalit. The Masalit are indigenous, clearly Black Africans. So the Arab-minded killers, the Jinjuit, they're implementing a policy to literally kill off. It's the worst humanitarian crisis. So in other words, so they went into El Fasher Hospital, for example, a couple of weeks ago, and this was a maternity ward, to not only kill the patients, and that's their goal, to kill off all of the Masalit, all of the Africans in the area. And here's what's even more criminal and genocidal, is to kill some of the women, but leave some of the women so that they can reproduce with these women, so that the next offspring will be Jinjuit. And then on the other side, the goal is to kill all of the men, but the men are not well armed to really defend themselves. So there's massacres, mass graves, and there's some teenage boys, for example, and teenage girls have been able to escape and give interviews. So we know exactly what's happening, what the Jinjuit are saying, but the goal is to literally to wipe out all of the current Africans, and then the next generation will be the Jinjuit. And by the way, we should also note that these people are not only genocidalists, the Jinjuit, they are ignorant. They don't read. They have no real, no education. They're not intelligent. So whenever any of the people in Sudan catch these criminals, there's no discussion, there's no tribunal, there's nothing. They'll be killed. And you see videos of these people. You look at him and say, wow, that's a Jinjuit. Yes, look how young he is. He's ignorant and he looks Black African. Yes, but it's the mindset that he believes that he's an Arab. So you see all of these outrageous videos of genocide that's taking place right now. And one other thing I should add, the Jinjuit were supported by Omar Bashir. He had them protecting him because his government was shaky before he was overthrown in 2019. Bashir is the one that rebranded these Jinjuit as some so-called respected rapid support forces, and because they were helping Bashir on the Western Front to bomb Nuba, the Nuba Mountains, and kill as many people as possible. What is the goal? Why is this so important for them? To take and confiscate the land. That's what it's about. So Arabs, historically, Arab means someone who's nomadic, who's a nomadic desert dweller. Mm-hmm. They don't have a land. These are nomadic people. So these criminals need land, and that's why replacing, not just displacing, but literally physically replacing Africans with this modern group identified as Arab is so important to them, so they can take the land. And to do so, they have to kill off as many Africans as possible. So this is why it's the worst humanitarian crisis. It's not just taking the land, but to kill off an entire generation of people, which is why that war is being supported by outside forces, because the Jinjuit, these criminals, they need weapons, they need support, and that's why they're able to gain support from different countries.
What was the term that you used? You said the Arabs called the Sudanese, the dark Sudanese. There was a word that you used.
They call them Zerga.
Zerga. When you said that, that just made me think about how Italians call Black people Mulyan, which is a kind of a corruption of the word eggplant. Because of the purple, the dark nature of the eggplant, Italians will use a derogatory that call Black people Mulyan. That just popped in my head. So when you mention outside forces supporting Bashir and the Jinjuit. So where does the U.S. factor into all that?
Well, one thing to take a look at is very interesting. On the campaign trail with the debates between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, they didn't discuss Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
It was not debated. It wasn't discussed because as bad as this humanitarian crisis is, it's literally a side issue. It wasn't front and center. I mean, not that they adequately addressed the massacres in Gaza either. So the U.S., I mean, it's a strategic area because of the gold, Sudan, and also oil, but it's not really the biggest. It's not really the biggest area for them. And when the war broke out in April of 2023, all the U.S. did was just intervene so they can evacuate people from the U.S. embassy in Khartoum. But so, with the Crown Prince, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, telling Trump to get him, what kind of sense does that make? The Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia having a madman who's misled the public, who misled the voters that he was not going to have some heavy hand in promoting war. So, I mean, the U.S. is always standing ready, but I think the bigger, more concrete influence far beyond the U.S. is what's happening from the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. They send in weapons and so forth in planes to a place called El Janina. This is right on the border between Sudan and Chad. And the UAE, these are deceptive criminals because they make it seem like that they're sending in medical support. Oh, look at what we've done. Why would you be sending medical support to particular locations that are far away from the refugee areas? This is all nothing but a front to send weapons, and they've lied. So Nima Abakir, she's a reporter from the Sudan, and she did a report back at the end of 2023. Actually, it was November 2023 on the war of Sudan. So she was able to really kind of maneuver and sneak into the country with her camera crew to document exactly what the Jinjuit were doing. And when they went to the west, to the El Janina area, there were people who were in the area helping the reporters with secret footage to show that they had warehouses of weapons from the UAE. And why is the UAE so concerned about supporting the Jinjuit in Sudan? Well, it's pretty obvious because they're able to extract as much gold as possible. People may not be aware, but Sudan in the past and the present, it's a huge area for gold production. And in my field work, we've gone to some of the gold production sites that are around, but there was literally a gold rush before the Civil War broke out. As a matter of fact, one of my colleagues is trying to get me to invest in some gold mining equipment so that we can, quote unquote, strike it rich. But I told him, no, that doesn't work, brother. There's always rumors of somebody striking it rich and nothing happens. But you see these areas where it's remote areas. And when you see all of the lights and activity when you're driving in these remote areas, as we've done, you would think that it's a town in front of us. No, that's a gold mining operation. So the UAE is extracting tons of gold to enrich itself while it gives arms to the Jinjuit. That's one problem. And the Jinjuit can only operate if Chad, the neighboring country, allows it to operate. So the Jinjuit are operating on the border between western Sudan, the western part of Sudan, and eastern part of Chad. And so Chad is supporting. You have you mentioned Libya. Libya is not united in many respects, but there are parts. There's some factions in Libya that also support the Jinjuit as well. Russia was supporting the Jinjuit. But they've shifted now. The Russians, because they were also extracting gold, extracting resources. So now Russia being involved. And by the way, Russia and Ukraine, they now are both on the side of the Sudanese government, even though they're fighting each other. But Russia changed and now supports the Sudanese armed forces because the Sudanese armed forces has given Russia an important strategic location right on the Red Sea at Port Sudan. Port Sudan is one of the most important ports in the area. Now the Russians have a financial base there. That's why they shifted from working with the Jinjuit, the killers, the murderers, the genocidalists, and extracting gold to now working with the Sudanese military, the government, because they have their strategic interests secured. So those are some of the main players in all of this, but it's a toxic soup. But we should also be clear that even without these international forces, there are the internal contradictions in Sudan that were there before the war broke out. And these Arabs are at the center of it because these are wild genocidalists that are very ignorant. And I can tell you that the people have no respect for them and they kill them on sight. And my colleague in Germany, because everybody's been displaced now, I have more than 120 people in my adopted family in Sudan. Everybody's displaced. They're in Egypt, they're in Saudi Arabia, they're in the UAE, they're in Germany. And my colleague in Germany, my good brother, was saying that they attacked the Jinjuit even in Germany. No questions asked. You're a Jinjuit, then you will pay a price no matter where you are in the world. And this is how people operate when they see these killers who have destroyed the country of Sudan. I'm sorry. I think you're muted.
You mentioned the gold mining operations that are going on in Sudan. Who are the miners? Not who owns the mines. When you made mention of that, the first thing I thought about was De Beers in South Africa, and De Beers owns the mine, but the miners are the Black South Africans. Who are the miners in the gold miners in these operations?
There are big companies from Europe. Mm-hmm. There's big companies in Europe that were mining, not in the West. They were really doing a lot of mining in the northern areas in Sudan. And so all of the mining companies are foreign companies. They're mainly from Europe. But of course, as we can imagine, all the workers are Sudanese folks. And this is why you see from all over Sudan, whether it's in northern Sudan, central Sudan, western Sudan, from all over the area, you see these very young brothers. And you know that they're from different areas because you can tell with the cultural marking, so-called scarification, and the different, some are smaller, some are very tall. And you can see that these are miners, people actually working in these gold mining operations, and they're in gold mining operations. Either you see them there or you see them in trucks going to or from the area, because it always looks strange when we're driving in remote areas to an archaeological site and they're in the hot desert. You have people totally wrapped up. Why would someone be wrapped up like that? Because it gets very windy and sandy in the desert, and these are guys who are working in the gold mining operation, getting paid very little. To them, it's just work and it's nothing else. But it's out. Now, this is totally outside interest, making money. And then they were obviously in cahoots with the old Omar Bashir government, but now the rapid support forces who were validated by Bashir are in charge of it. So there's a lot of these kind of mining operations, all by foreign companies. I saw no indigenous profit or benefit from all of the gold that's being extracted and robbed from the area.
One of the reasons why I asked about the United States involvement in all of this is because we know if there's usually unrest, the United States has a hand in it, but also looking at Sudan and South Sudan and the water interests. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, South Sudan is the newest country in the world. So South Sudan broke away. This is the southern part. They broke away from Sudan and formed their own independent country in 2011. So there's still a disputed area. The Abyei area between southern part of Sudan, the original country, and then the northern part of South Sudan. So there's a disputed area over resources in the area. So, and that's not the only. So that's a conflict area, but it's part of a more important regional conflict, because the Nile River, which is the longest river in the world, there's a Nile River a Nile Basin group of countries, about 10 countries that rely on the Nile. There's different branches. There's a so-called white branch of the Nile, the white Nile, the blue Nile. There's also there's an Atbar River that feeds into it. So you got a lot of countries that depend on it. So a lot of the conflict, or some of the conflict, we have to look at Ethiopia and the Grand Renaissance Dam, and they say, look, the blue Nile originates in Ethiopia, in Lake Tana, and I go there every year to that area, and so they're using the resources in Ethiopia, the water resources that they think will help their country and help the people. Egypt, however, said you cannot use that much water. You cannot. In fact, we despise you building dams that would lessen the water that we get down in Egypt. And Ethiopia said, look, we don't respect some colonial agreement that was made when the British were in control of the area, because you now have the lion's share of the water resources based on this agreement 100 years ago. We don't respect that. And Egypt said, well, if you build a dam and you're not abiding by this, we will go to war. So Egypt actually has threatened multiple times to go to war against Ethiopia for building dams and using more water than what Egypt says that they can use. And Ethiopia simply reminded Egypt that we're independent. We've never been colonized. So you can rise up, but we will do what we think is best for our country. And so you got that conflict occurring, and that's strictly related to water resources. But the nerve of Egypt attempting to impose a British colonial agreement that was made in their interest, and to leave out everybody else, to Sudan. I mean, there's all these countries that benefit from the Nile, and Egypt has built dams themselves. And these dams, like the Aswan High Dam that was finished in 1970, this didn't benefit the people of Egypt, particularly not the Nubians in the south. They built the dam supposedly to create all this hydroelectricity. But wait a minute. You could have built wind turbines. You could have built solar panels. And there's also micro hydro. But no, they wanted to make money and then also displace Africans. There's 39 Nubian villages at the bottom of Lake Nasser, or the Nubians called it Lake Nasser, simply because the government decided that it would build a dam and do what they wanted to do in terms of where they built it, when they built it, and the Nubians were not even consulted. And that is a dispute right now that is a result of a dam built 50 years ago.
So as we look at this conflict in Sudan, some have labeled it a genocide, I believe. And not only that, you've got, I think, famine as well. How do you see this working itself out?
Wow. Wow. It's hard to say. Something that's interesting is I interact with my adopted colleagues and others. They either don't want to talk about it, or they make it seem as though, and these are credible people, but they want to make it seem as though that it's not as bad as it is, that the Jinjuweed have been defeated. They have not been defeated. The government does have certain areas that it controls, but the Jinjuweed have a strong base in the West, and that's not decreasing. It's hard to say how, but the one thing to do is a cutoff. If the UAE was cut off, that would help. But I'll tell you something that's problematic with young people in this country. Those that are on social media, the social media influencers, to flex, they all think they're going to Dubai, a main city in the UAE. That's the ultimate flex. Look at me. I'm live streaming. Look at this elaborate facility that I'm staying at, elaborate meals and all of this nonsense. And so for the young people, if you don't go to Dubai, you're not a real influencer. You're not a person of significance. So they're giving credibility and money to a country that is in the midst of helping to kill off Africans. I would say that you're going to have problems with, people supporting the Jinjuweed in Chad. There's going to be some Libyan fighters involved, but all this money coming from the UAE, if that dried up, that would make a difference. It really would, because countries like Russia now and Egypt, they are on the side of the military. And the people, as I said, they don't really support either side, but they do want the military to crush the Janjaweed, and the Janjaweed cannot survive. So this guy Hemeti, who's a general, there's no way they can survive if it wasn't for the massive support of the United Arab Emirates. So it's hard to say how it would end, other than the military continuing to take more and more territory back as millions have been displaced, and there have been some people that have returned to Sudan, but it's hard. I mean, return to what? The homes are destroyed. The homes have been occupied by these killers, and things have been destroyed on every level. It's really hard to say, but it has been 2.5 years, and something's got to give. And I don't know what. Obviously, Trump and the U.S. government has strategic interests with resources. They've not been a major player, but Trump he's out there. He's wild. He has interest in controlling the resources of the region. So it's hard to say on either side. I hear what my colleagues are saying, but I know that, and here's something that's not. Honestly, it's painful for them, because not only in Sudan, but the same thing when I'm spending a lot of time in Ethiopia, I noticed that my colleagues downplay these kind of things, because the only thing I can really make from this is embarrassing to know that the country is in turmoil, political chaos, turmoil. There's civilians that are suffering, and there's no immediate solution to it. So it's really hard to say at this point, but the war now has been 2.5 years, and it's shameful that the revolution of the people were hijacked. And one other thing for people to know, there's a large Sudanese population in Washington, D.C. and New York. And so over the years, the Sudanese, including Nubians, have led protests. And one of my close colleagues, Sudanese, Nubian colleagues from Sudan, told me that she was getting death threats from Sudanese that she better stop her activity immediately. And so she was concerned about her young children and these people. So she did stop. So that's what's happening, to try to make sure that the international community is not informed about the genocide and massacres that are taking place in Sudan. And these people, their goal is to shut down opposition here. One last point, about, I don't know, maybe a few months ago, there was an event here in the Oakland Bay Area. It was actually in Oakland, and the Sudanese of Northern California had an event. I thought the event was pretty well done, but I noticed that it didn't really get into the conflict. So during the Q&A, I grabbed the mic and said, look, let's be very clear. We're talking about the Janjaweed. These are killers and mass murderers. You need to clarify this for the audience. It's not just a civil war. Janjaweed have no credibility. And as soon as I finished, when the event was over, a guy came up to me and was, oh yeah, I don't really like that, because people now, you said that Janjaweed are using Chad, and now they think we're the problem, and that you got to look at it from what we see in Chad. I said, brother, I didn't look at it from the point of view of what's happening in Chad. I'm looking at the point of view of what I've seen and what I know about Sudan. And Chad is being used as a base to cross the border and kill people. And then after the event, a lady came to me and pulled me to the side and said, he's Janjaweed. This guy's Janjaweed. That's why he came to you. He said, every time we have an event, he's there to cause confusion and disruption. So, these are a couple of cases that I know of that they are operating here in the U.S. to try to make sure that the narrative is not too insightful to expose their crimes against the people of Sudan.
The Kashiba, thank you very much for your super sticker. Greatly appreciate that. One of the things that there have been a couple of people in the chat that have mentioned that China and Russia are involved in Sudan, and you've talked about how Russia has switched sides. But when I think about the Soviet Union's involvement in some of the freedom struggles, the decolonization struggles with Angola and other countries on the continent, Patrice Lumumba University is in Moscow. but now it seems as though they're on the wrong side of this fight. Am I assessing that properly?
That the Russians are on the wrong side?
Yes.
Well, now they're on the right side now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so now they are, because they are supporting the Sudanese armed forces.
Okay.
And so
I misunderstood what. So go ahead and finish that. I misunderstood what you said. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So as I said, the people are not really supporting either side, but they do want the Sudanese armed forces to ouster and to kick out the genocidal Janjaweed. So now the Russians are on the right side, even if their reasons are not the best. At least they are, because they want the strategic location on the Red Sea in Port Sudan.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's quickly move to Mali, to Burkina Faso, to the organization, the Alliance of Sahel States, and Niger, because that's a whole different dynamic. And I guess because of whether it be the Epstein files or the shutdown of the government, that in terms of Western press, that whole dynamic has been taken off the radar. So can you give us any insight into what's going on in Burkina Faso? What's happening there of note?
Yeah, that's a very important location. General Traoré, or the President Traoré, he's a revolutionary in the same order as Patrice Lumumba and other leaders in the 60s. He's uncompromising. He's clear about the position. He's kicked out foreign interests, kick out the French military, nationalize and take control of the resources and mining operations. This is exemplary. And then break away from ECOWAS that wasn't doing anything to form the Sahel states, and to make sure that they have an alliance and a bloc to make sure that they protect each other. And so Burkina Faso is a very strategic and important area, but it's a great symbol because we see the uncompromising position of Traoré, and we all can learn from that, and his fearlessness, even with all the assassination attempts. But he said that we've learned from what has happened in the past. So whether it's Thomas Sankara and others, he's been able to learn and be uncompromised. And what's amazing about it, he didn't do like most leaders. He's not moved his home at all. Traoré still lives in the same location that he had been living. Usually people will move to a presidential palace. He didn't do that, you know. And he's, as we would say in the movement, ready for the revolution. In other words, he's always got his fatigues on. He keeps his pistol. So betray me if you want, but I'm not waiting on and relying on a whole bunch of other people. That's not just a symbol, but it's clear to me that's who Traoré is, as a uncompromising revolutionary. But it's a problem for the West. It's a problem for the French. They can't divide these Sahel states that broke away from the ineffective ECOWAS, just the ineffective, African Union. They don't even take positions to show you how irresponsible they are, and they haven't done much. So this alliance of the Sahel states, the former French colonies, is very important, and it's a great symbol for us who, even if people were around in the 60s, we have a clear example of someone operating the same way as a Patrice Lumumba, who the U.S. was definitely involved with the assassination of. Why was Patrice Lumumba assassinated just a couple of weeks before Kennedy took office? Because they wanted to get rid of the problem and not have it on Kennedy's slate when he actually took office in 1961. But this is the kind of thing that happened. But with Traoré, it's one of the great examples, and I think people are inspired around the world to see his independent stance in every area that matters in terms of protecting his country and making sure that he makes an example. Well, not making an example, but he is providing an example of how to be independent and rise up against the French and any other interests that want to turn Burkina Faso into what it used to be called Upper Volta as a colony.
So understanding that the hegemon doesn't go quietly into the long dark night, uh, um, are you, and where is AFRICOM in all of this now? Are folks sitting and closely observing the movement, anticipating a strike of some form, a military strike in some form or fashion? I know initially they tried to buy off some of Traore's members of his support group. That didn't go well. So what's the? I can't just see the United States just folding its cards and saying, "Well, I think we've lost the continent."
Yeah, I completely agree. I think AFRICOM, they will. I think they're poised to strike in some kind of way, as they're doing in the East. AFRICOM is certainly a part of bombing Somalia and other countries, but it's not so easy just to bomb and then and try to hide their hands. So AFRICOM can't be trusted, and I think Traore knows that, and people around him knows that. But as someone who has got a legitimate military background, he's able to create a trusted inner circle. So, and the world sees exactly what's happening. So how are they going to get away with some wild excuse or wild story about why the U.S. and its allies tried to go in and bomb Burkina Faso? So it's not looking good for how they want to try to take out Traore and to turn around the revolution that he has spearheaded and continues to spearhead in Burkina Faso. So obviously, people should not trust AFRICOM, but let's see what happens, because it's not an easy political strategic situation for them as they try to hijack the revolution there.
And as you spend a lot of time in the region, what's the broader influence that Traore's success in Burkina Faso, that Niger's success in throwing out the French, those successful revolutions, what's the broader sense or sentiment? Is this now being looked at by other countries as a positive sign that they need to replicate?
Oh yeah, and like the Sahel states. So you have Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali.
Right.
So this is very important, because in each of those areas they have these wild men. They have these the people that want to impose Sharia or Islamic law. They want to take over parts of or really to transform the whole area under Islamic rule. And so what the example of Burkina Faso is showing people is that Africans can unite in their country and also regionally. So the great model is clear, because Mali's fighting a similar battle, and so is Nigeria, for that matter. And you have these wild, and I would say ignorant, Muslims in different places that want to come and dominate African lands and impose a Islamic state. I think some of the viewers would know from a little bit more than a decade ago, there was an attack on Mali and the Timbuktu manuscripts by ignorant people that don't read at all. They don't know. They don't even know how to read. That's why they figured anything that's pre-Islam or pre-Muhammad it's of the infidels, and it must be destroyed. Anything related to anything pre-Islamic. So I know a lot of people who are Muslim, but they don't relate to any of that. And you only know they're Muslim because maybe if you look at their name and maybe how they pray. Other than that, these are balanced Africans who are African first before they embrace any religion. And the example in the Sahel states, with Mali being able to protect part of its classical African heritage, and Niger working to do the same thing. But Burkina Faso is risen under Traore as the leader among equals. And that's how we have to look at it. And it's a great example. And so the French are not doing so well. And they got a phony image anyway. I've had bad experiences in France. They talk about how cosmopolitan they are. No, you're a colonial country, and all this nonsense where the people in the cities Paris. In France. I remember they rose up and they were rebelling all over France some years ago, and they would try to talk about how great it is to live in France, and they incorporate everybody. No, you don't. And not only that, but Burkina Faso would teach you in modern times, what it means to try to deal with an independent African country where a leader cannot be bought off.
Professor Manu Ampim, thank you, my brother. Thank you so much, man. That was great work right there. I really appreciate it. And you fit us in a tight schedule, and greatly appreciate it. I'll do my best to work you back in. That is in a time that's more convenient for you.
Yes, sir. I'm glad to join you, my brother.
really appreciate it, man.
Okay.
And when I come home, when I come to Oakland, we'll break bread.
It sounds good. I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it. Take care.
All right. You too.
All right, folks. Dr. Wilmer Leon here inside. No, what am I talking about? Connecting the dots is where we are. And again, Brother Ampim, thank you so much for joining me. New show tomorrow. Dimitri Lascaris will join us tomorrow. So lock in, stay tuned for that one. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. The Kashiba told y'all, hit the like button, people. You had a couple of others in here that were making the point. Great info and clarity on the genocide in Sudan. Thank you both. We greatly we appreciate that. We hang on a second. I'm getting buzzed here by the people. I really got to pay attention. Sorry, I forgot. So forgive me. Where am I talking about? Oh, and again, phenomenal insight. This is information. This is clarity. This is analysis that is going to be very, very, very hard for you. I know he's a regular on Carl Nelson's show. So credit and tribute to Carl Nelson on that one. But folks, this is where the information is. And thank you all that have supported us up to this point. And we need more of you to continue to do so because there's too much going on right now for us to be distracted by a whole bunch of other foolishness when we should be focused on the task at hand. Again, Dimitri Lascaris will join us tomorrow. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Have a blessed remainder of your day. Until then, and then after then, I'm going to be Dr. Wilmer Leon. See y'all tomorrow. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.